pouches. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this sweet little zipper pouch. We're going to learn how to put a zip in, add a lining, and also how to box the corners of our pouch to give it a nice flat bottom so it will stand up on its own. Here's what you're going to need. So first of all, what you need to do is you need to go to your PDF and draw yourself out a pattern using the measurements that I've described in there. I've used some tracing paper here for my pattern piece. I've drawn out the measurements and cut it round, and you just need to remind yourself the top of the pouch because it's slightly longer than it is deep. So just pop a little mark along the top to remind you so that when you're cutting your fabrics out, you get them the right way up. So once you've done that, once you've got your pattern piece cut out, you then need to choose your fabrics. So I'm going to go for these pretty pink ones today, my favourite colour. I'm going to choose this beautiful cotton canvas for the outside. It's really hard wearing. It will give the pouch a really nice upward standing look, and it's not going to be too floppy. So I'm going to use this for the outside of my pouch, and then for my lining, I'm just going to use a cotton fabric and this gorgeous pink candy stripe fabric. And then you need to choose a zip as well. You can choose an 8-inch zip or bigger. This is an 8-inch zip, and I'm going for this pretty turquoise colour. And this is a closed end zip. So when I open and close the zip, it stops at the little stoppers here, preventing the zipper pull from coming off. So next you want to cut your fabrics out. So simply get your fabric, have it on a nice flat surface. You want to apply your pattern onto your fabric using the best space of your fabric as you can, and then either using scissors or a rotary cutter you want to cut round. You want 2 of your outer fabric and 2 cut of your lining fabric. You don't need to cut a seam allowance into this pattern, it's already in the measurements. So you should now have 2 outer, 2 lining pieces of fabric and your zipper ready to start your pouch. Here's what you're going to need to do first. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start on one side of our pouch. You're going to need 1 of your outer pieces of fabric and 1 of your lining pieces of fabric and your zipper to start with. So first of all, get your outer piece of fabric and you want it the right way up, so make sure you've got the top at the top. So again, refer back to your pattern and make sure you've got it the right way round. If you've got a pattern on your fabric that needs to be the right way round, also make sure you've got that led how you wish to see it when your bag is finished. You then want to get your zipper. You want to decide which way you're going to open your pouch. I always like to open from left to right, but you can decide entirely up to you. Whatever way you want your bag to open, you need to make sure the zipper pull is on that side. So I want mine from the left to the right, so my zipper pull is on the left-hand side. I'm just going to open that slightly, and then I'm going to flip my zip over so that it's face down onto that outer fabric. And then I'm just going to clip that zip to the top of that fabric. I'm using fabric clips here. I just use them for ease, but you can also use pins. Just 3 will be plenty. And then I'm going to apply my lining fabric on top of those 2 pieces of fabric now, my outer fabric and my zip. I want to make sure, again, my lining fabric is faced the right way up. So if you lay it next to your outer fabric and just turn it over like so, that will ensure it's the right way up. And then I'm just going to move my clips to clip all 3 layers together. Next you want to go to your sewing machine and we're going to sew our zipper on all the way across the top of our bag here. Next we're going to go to our sewing machine to sew across the top of our pouch to sew our zip on. You're going to need to apply your zipper foot to allow you to do this. That's the little skinny foot you should have with your machine supplies. And you just need to pop that onto your sewing machine ready to sew. This foot will allow you to get really close to the zipper teeth and have a nice neat finish. You want to position your sewing machine up right along the edge of the teeth of the zip, which you'll be able to feel underneath that fabric. I'm sewing on the lining side, but it doesn't overly matter which side you choose to sew on, but you do need to have the teeth of your zip laying on the side that your needle is coming down in your zipper foot. So in your zipper foot, you may or may not have the opportunity to choose which side your needle falls. Mine is falling on the left-hand side, so I need my fabric and the zip to be led on the left-hand side of that foot. And then you want to sew all the way along, doing a back stitch when you start and when you finish to secure your stitching. To take your clips and pins out as you go, and as you reach your zipper pull underneath your fabric, you want to move that out the way. If you don't do this, it will push your sewing machine foot around that zipper pull, the knobbly bit here you can see, and that won't make you that will make your sewing line not be smooth. So make sure your needle is down in your fabric like so. Lift your foot and move that zipper pull back out of the way. It can be a bit fiddly, give it a wiggle and it should move. Okay. Then lay your fabric down nice and flat again, lower your foot and carry on until the end of your zipper. And then that's your first row of stitching all the way along one side of your zipper. So once you've done that first side, just double check it inside to make sure you're happy with how close you've got to the teeth of your zip. You don't want to sew too close because you want to be able to open your zipper with ease from front to back. Once you're happy with that, you can then apply your zip to the other side of your fabric. So you want to get your other two pieces of fabric. Again, get your first bit, your outer fabric, face up, the right way up. Make sure the longer side is at the top, referring to your pattern. You want to take your zip, so you want to make sure you can see your zip and zipper pull again. You want to turn your zip so that it's face down onto that right side fabric, your outer fabric, and you want to make sure you're measuring up the edges of the fabric, not the zip to the edge of the new fabric. So zip along the top of this outer fabric here, lining up the edges, and then again grab your lining fabric right way up, flip it over, right sides facing on top of all of that, sandwiching it all in the middle. Then apply your clips or pins to all three of those fabrics again. And you want to sew along this top edge. So again, positioning your zipper foot up against the edge of the teeth on the zip, you can feel, move your threads out the way. You want to back stitch to start you off. And then you want to sew all the way down that edge. You may need to move that zipper pull out the way again. So make sure your needle is down in your fabric. Lift your foot. Open your fabrics to find the zipper pull and just wiggle it out of the way. This bit can be a bit fiddly, but it will move. You get the knack of it in the end. Just straighten your fabrics back up and then finish off that last piece. So we should have now successfully sewn across both sides of our zipper. We can now open our pouch back up. So we should have 2 lining pieces underneath facing the right way out and 2 outer pieces of fabric on the top facing the right way out. What you can do now is just give your bag a press up to the zip. Just be careful not to press on the zipper teeth if they're plastic, as they may melt. So just leading the iron up the edge just to flatten those fabrics and hold them away from your zipper teeth. So once we've given our zipper pouch a press on both sides, our fabric is nice and flat around our zip. It's away from our teeth, so our zipper is not going to get caught when we're opening and closing. Our next job is to run a line of top stitching all the way along the top of each side of our zipper pouch. You can refer back to your normal sewing machine foot to do this, as we're not getting so close to the teeth. And you can also at this point add a decorative touch if you wanted to. So if you would like to add something along the top of your zipper pouch, now would be the time to do that. So you might want to consider adding a piece of lace or ribbon, or even adding a decorative stitch along that top just to give it an extra little touch. Okay, so I've replaced my zipper foot now with my standard sewing machine foot. I've popped my casing under, ready to sew along that top stitch, and I'm just making sure I'm getting close enough to this edge that I'm going to be happy with. I've opened my zipper pull out of the way, and again, as I sew down, I'm going to stop with my needle down and move that zipper pull away to prevent my stitch line from jumping out around there as I sew along. You also might want to consider this stage your coloured sewing thread. I'm using white on here because it will blend in perfectly, but you might just want to think about what colour thread you're using. Remember to do your back stitch when you begin and when you finish to lock your stitch. Just to show you underneath, my lining fabrics are laid one each side of my zipper pouch. You want to make sure these lay nice and flat underneath. Okay, so I've sewn along one side of my zipper pouch. On the front I'm going to add a little bit of lace decoration, so I'm going to just add that now. So on the front of my zipper pouch, I'm adding a little bit of lace trim. So I've just pinned it in place where I want that lace trim to lie. And I'm going to stitch along now along the top of that lace to give my top stitching. You just want to make sure on the reverse that your lining fabric stays nice and flat underneath. Okay, so back from my sewing machine, I've now stitched a top stitch on both sides, adding my piece of lace to the front of my bag as well, just top stitching along. So you can see from the reverse 2 rows of stitching. I'm just going to trim off all of my threads here. I'm not going to worry about trimming my zip ends at this time, so that my work is nice and neat. So next we want to sew our pouch all together. So I'm just going to open my zipper up slightly, and then I want to put together the right size of my 2 outer pieces of fabric and the right size of my 2 lining pieces of fabric. And I want to get these fairly lined up. I'm going to start at the zipper parts on both sides to get them lined up how I want them to look nice and neat. So with the open end of the zip, what's really important at this point is you want to make sure that your zipper is pointing down towards your lining fabric. So if you hold your zip and make a H shape in the edge, and then you want to poke the zip down towards your lining fabric. So the teeth are pointing downwards. You don't want them poking up at the top of your zipper pouch. And then I'm going to pop a clip, or you can pop a pin in there, and I'm going to do the same to the other side. So I'm going to get that H shape on the edge there, and I'm going to push the zipper down towards the lining fabric. This end's a bit trickier because it's a fixed closed end. You just want to make sure in there that you still got your bag level at the top, the two sides of the fabric, and you want to pop a clip. Once you've positioned those two and secured them, you then just want to make sure your bag looks fairly level all the rest of the way around, and add some clips or add some pins just to hold it in place. Same with the lining. And just add enough securings to make sure your bag will not move when you sew it. And then we're going to sew all the way around our bag now, but we want to leave a gap at the bottom of the lining in the middle here. It's really important to leave it in the middle because we're going to box the corners. So we want to have about a 2-inch gap left in the middle of our bag. We want to make sure we've left our zipper open inside to turn it in the right way. And now we're going to sew all the way around the outside of our zipper pouch, about 1 centimetre in, slightly more if you needed to. And if you need to trim your bag before you start, now's the time to do it. Okay, so back at the sewing machine now, I'm going to sew all the way around. I'm just following the edge of my machine foot to the edge of my fabric to give me that 1 centimetre seam allowance. And I'm starting on my lining fabric at the bottom, leaving that 2-inch gap behind my foot here. And I'm going to start with a back stitch to secure my stitch. When you get to a corner, you want to make sure your needle is down in your fabric. Lift your foot and spin your fabric round. Okay, so I've now stitched all the way around the outside of my zipper pouch. I'm just going to now trim all the edges. I can cut off my zipper that's overhanging, tidy it all up. You don't want to cut too close to your stitch line. Still try and leave that 1 centimetre seam allowance. Just trim anything that's overhanging more than that. Trim off all your threads as well. So that your work is nice and neat. And now we're ready to do our boxed corners. So to do our boxed corners, we're going to need a few more essentials. We are going to need a ruler or a tape measure. We are going to need a tailor's pencil. And we are going to need a pin to mark our position. So we're going to start with the boxing of corners of our 2 outer edges. So that's these 2 edges here on our outer fabrics. We're going to leave our bag the wrong way out, and we want to grab one of our corners and we want to hold it up facing us. So what we want to do is turn it from being flat this way to being flat on the diagonal as such, making a triangle. So I always think about this stage as opening a bag of crisps. You want to pick out that corner, lay it flat so you've got a triangle shape. You want to open up your seams just to get it to lay a bit flatter. So both sides. So that's the front and back seam. And then you want to get that triangle as nice and flat and even as you can. Now, to get a lovely box corner and to get your corners in a lovely cross shape, the seams, the key is to have this seam directly parallel with this seam behind. So a little trick to help you do that: if you get a pin and put it in the center seam line on one side, you want that pin to come out on the center seam line the other side, and then you know they're directly lined up. So just play around until your pin comes out the other side of the seam in the middle. So it's going in one and coming out the other. Pop that pin in and that will hold it directly flat either side. So once you've done that, and I've got my triangle here facing me, I need to then measure my boxes. So the boxes on the little pouch I showed you earlier are 1 inch boxes. It just gives a really small flat bottom to this little pouch, just enough to make it stand up nicely. So what we want to do is get our tape measure or our ruler, and we want to measure 1 inch out from that top point. So not the edge of the fabric here, but the inner point here where our seam finishes. So we put our ruler there at 1 inch and we mark in 1 inch. Now you can either use a ruler that's got markings on to get that really straight. I tend to just do it by eye. So you want to mark all the way across once you've got that marking. You can't mark down 1 inch because it's not the same measurement, it is slightly longer. So you want to measure 1 inch down, make a mark and draw your line across. And this is the line that we're then going to sew across to make our box corner. You want to do that on both of your corners of your outer lining. So if I just show you again, you get your corner, open it like a packet of crisps, open up your seams, either side. Get your pin to line up your seams parallel. So in one seam, out the other. Keep that corner nice and flat on the work surface in front of you. Measure 1 inch from that top point and draw that 1 inch across. You're not going to see these drawn lines, so don't worry about the colour of your pen or pencil. And then you want to stitch across those 2 drawn lines that you've made on the 2 bottom box corners. So at our sewing machine now, I've got my first triangle underneath the sewing machine. I've got my needle lined up with that line that I've drawn. I'm going to take my pin out as I go, and I'm going to draw sew a straight line across that corner, back stitch when I start and back stitch when I finish. Once you've done that, you can trim those corners off above your stitch line. Just take those corners away, leaving yourself a good ½ centimetre seam allowance, and do that on both sides. So as you can see, that then gives the bottom of your bag that square shape. Next, you want to replicate those box corners on your lining fabric. So I'm going to do exactly the same again, but on the lining fabric to replicate what we've done on the bottom here. So once you've completed that, your bag should look somewhat like this. You've got 2 box corners in your lining, 2 box corners in your outer fabric, and you can still get to the gap that you've left in your lining to turn it in the right way. The next step to do is to turn your bag in and see what your finished product looks like. So you turn in right the way through the zip, bringing that outer lining all the way up through the bag to reveal your beautiful zipper pouch. Get your fingers in, push your box corners out. And you also want to just push up, ease up gently the ends of your zippers. You can open your zip now fully. And make sure that lining is nice and flat. And your zipper pouch should look something like this. Now hopefully you're feeling super proud of what you've made so far. And the last little bit to finish your zipper pouch off is really simply to close up that inner gap. You can either do this by the machine, so just bring that gap up, keep it folded under and just sew straight across, or you can just do a little ladder stitch or overcast stitch on there to finish that off by hand. And then once you've done that, you will then have your very own little lined, fully lined with a zipper pouch to use with pride.